And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Saturday, August 30th, 2025. And to set things up as of this later Saturday morning, we have an area of low pressure pushing across and north of the western Aleutians, and that feature will just slowly set up here in the central Bering through the course of the weekend, even into early Monday. And there is a front ahead of that has brisk southeast to south winds with a moist southerly flow. So we're going to have rain pushing in along areas of the west and southwest coast and down here from the eastern into the lower eastern Aleutians into the lower Alaska Peninsula. So that early Sunday morning, high pressure in place over the lower Gulf, North Pacific will keep generally VFR conditions along the northern, northeastern Gulf Coast and much of the Panhandle, as well as the southeastern eastern mainland. But where there is some moisture and upslope flow, we have IFR conditions along the western Alaska range, especially from near Windy Pass all the way down to Lake Clark Merrill. And then we find IFR conditions parts of the middle Yukon Valley, back along the southern Seward coastline and the YK deltas, including St. Lawrence Island, Nunavik Island, and into the eastern central Aleutians. Sunday afternoon, MVFR conditions as moisture and some rain showers and rain spread inland. We find widespread MVFR conditions south slope of the Brooks Range, middle lower Yukon. We still have some IFR along the west arm of the Alaska Range, especially from around Rainy Pass south to near and east of Lake Iliamna. IFR surrounding east side of Kodiak Island and the south side or Pacific side of the Alaska Range, given that moist southeast south flow, and then areas of the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim coastline inland a bit, and St. Matthew on up toward St. Lawrence and the Bering Strait. Otherwise, we still have a fair amount of VFR conditions, eastern mainland, northeastern Gulf Coast, with some MVFR southern and western outer Panhandle coastline. Monday morning, we have VFR conditions, Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast, much of the southeast eastern mainland along the Elkan border, but IFR conditions holding along that west arm of the Alaska Range, eastern Kenai, western Gulf, eastern Kodiak Island, south side or Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, as well as IFR conditions continuing, especially inland from western Bristol Bay, including Wood-Tikchik State Park area along the lower Yukon coast, and then up through the Bering Strait. And for Monday afternoon, MVFR conditions extend along the Brooks Range, especially south slopes, and extending up along the Yukon, Koyukuk, Kobuk rivers. There can be some additional rainfall that cause water levels to come back up on the Kobuk River and some of the western rivers as that rain area just continues to be fed with this southerly flow along this front that's just going to be kind of stuck out here along the west coast and western interior. And we still have IFR conditions, eastern Kenai, western Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, south side of the Alaska Range, or I'm sorry, Alaska Peninsula, and then back out here through the Bering Strait, Nunavik Island, St. Matthew, and St. Lawrence. Otherwise, again, VFR conditions across the Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast up into the eastern mainland on Monday afternoon. So pass conditions Sunday, Aniktuvik Pass should generally hold on to MVFR conditions, as will Adigan Pass in the east central Brooks Range. Coming south, Lake Clark and Merrill will hold on to IFR conditions Sunday, as will Rainy Pass as we come up around Windy Pass, maybe becoming MVFR later morning and for the afternoon. Further east in the drier air, we're expecting Isabel Pass to remain VFR Sunday, as will Mentasta Pass. And then coming across the Copper River Basin, we have VFR conditions, including at Tanita Pass on Sunday, and then down to Portage Pass. Generally, VFR conditions should prevail Sunday, though the east entrance out there toward Prince William Sound may see some MVFR conditions moving in there for Sunday afternoon and evening. And Chilkoot and White in the northern Panhandle should generally enjoy VFR conditions on Sunday. Looking at the freezing levels at the surface, we do have temperatures at or a bit below freezing. Eastern Russia coming in across the northern mainland, south of the Brooks Range a bit, and then back out also into northwest Canada. Of note, though, with the low pressure that'll be sitting out here toward moving into the central Bering, the front arcing ahead of it, We have along and ahead of that front higher freezing levels aloft from 6,000 feet just north of the Bering Strait, 8,000 feet near Nome, and 10,000 feet there, Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay, and at or above 12,000 feet just south of the Alaska Peninsula. So there's that warmer, moist feed of air coming up into the western coast and mainland, as well as across the Alaska Peninsula on Sunday. And as a result, where there is thicker cloud cover producing precipitation, we may have areas of moderate icing along the Chukchi Sea coast above 8,000 feet, areas of the northern Bering near Nome, St. Lawrence Island above 10,000 feet, and then in the further south in the warmer air above 14,000 feet there over the lower Alaska Peninsula. And where there are some remnant showers, areas of the Alaska Range up to the 40-mile Gold Country, White Mountains, areas there could see some moderate icing above 8,000 feet. Here is the upper level jet stream winds at 30,000 feet, a broad southwesterly flow with 120 knot jet max just off of Kuskokwim Bay in the southeast Bering. So you can see here is the low pressure general circulation here, and here is the ridging way up there at 30,000 feet jet stream level. As we bring it down to 9,000 feet, 700 millibars approximately, here is that high pressure circulation between the lower Gulf and North Pacific. And then we have the low circulation out here pulling from the western into the central Bering. So ahead of it, south-southwest flow aloft, coming out of the North Pacific across the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and coming right up into the Kuskokwim Delta and lower Yukon region, where winds there 45 to just over 50 knots occurring. And then at 3,000 feet, pretty clearly, a couple of areas. First, along the eastern part of the Gulf, just offshore of, say, Sitka, we have northwest to north winds, 35, 40 knots, but more importantly, a broad area of southerly flow from the Alaska Peninsula, southwest coast, lower Yukon, Kuskokwim basins on up across the Seward Peninsula and the Lisburn Peninsula, winds of generally 40 to locally over 50 knots, especially there across parts of the Kuskokwim region around Bethel on up into the lower Yukon. And as a result, widespread moderate turbulence expected all along the western interior, west coast, down into the Alaska Peninsula, extending to eastern St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew, as well as St. Paul. We expect that moderate turbulence surface to 4,000 feet, along with the threat of low-level wind shear along much of the west coast and western interior, right along and in association with the front that is pulling all that moisture northward.